the veteran. Everyone ignored until his ID fell to the floor. The floors of Westfield High smelled like lemon wax and old sneakers. It was a smell that drifted down the halls before first period, mingling with teenage chatter and the thump of lockers slamming shut. No one really noticed where it came from, just that it was there, predictable, background, like the sound of the school bell or the faint buzz of fluorescent lights. And the man behind that scent? He moved through the halls like a whisper. Gray coveralls, work boots, a ring of keys at his hip that barely made a sound. He was in before sunrise and gone after most students had left. No one knew exactly how long he'd worked there. Some said 5 years. Others guessed 10. Most just called him the Old Janitor. He had a name, of course, Mr. Harris, first name Joseph, but students didn't really use it. To them, he was just a shape in the hallway, a man pushing a mop. Background, he was easy to mimic. The slow shuffle, the bent back, the blank expression. A few students, mostly sophomores with something to prove, made him the butt of jokes. "Watch this," they'd say, whispering to their friends before tossing a wrapper on the floor and waiting for him to pick it up. "Hey, Mr. H, how's retirement?" One senior once smirked. "Lose your bingo night again?" He never responded, never scolded, never even looked hurt. Just picked up the trash, turned his head slightly, and moved on. To them, silence meant permission, or indifference, or weakness. It never occurred to them it might mean something else. Teachers liked him well enough, mostly because he didn't cause problems. He fixed what needed fixing: chairs, faucets, clocks. He replaced broken tiles in the science lab without being asked. Once, he even sanded the stage before the spring musical, alone. After hours. He never complained, never talked about his life, didn't mingle in the teacher's lounge, didn't go to school barbecues, didn't decorate his locker for the holidays. He was polite, reliable, invisible, and that was how he seemed to like it. Then came the incident. It started like most pranks, small, stupid, and mean. 3 juniors, Tyler, Mason, and Denny, decided to go viral with a hallway challenge. Filmed themselves placing a wet, caution, slippery floor sign on a dry spot, then fake slipping in front of Mr. Harris to see if he'd react. It worked, kind of. The first clip got chuckles. The second, some likes. By the third, they were bored, so they upped the stakes. Tyler waited in the boys' restroom on the 3rd floor, right around the time Mr. Harris made his daily rounds. When the janitor came in, Tyler, phone hidden in his sleeve, pretended to trip and splashed a mop bucket toward the stall. Mr. Harris didn't flinch. He didn't speak. He stepped forward, checked the bucket, and began mopping without a word. The video got 12,000 views in 2 days. And then, someone in the comments asked, "Yo, is this the old dude with the scar on his hand? That guy's creepy AF." The camera had caught it, just for a second. A thick, pale scar that ran from Mr. Harris's wrist to his thumb, uneven, brutal, old. The video zoomed in. Comments exploded. Probably from prison. Bet he was in a gang. Why does he never talk? Dude's like a serial killer janitor. By Friday, the school administration was forced to review the footage. But what they found wasn't just a scar. When Assistant Principal Delgado asked Mr. Harris to stop by his office for a quick chat, the janitor showed up right on time, coveralls neatly zipped, hair combed flat. He sat silently while Delgado spoke, apologized, explained the situation, promised consequences for the students. Then, gently, he said, "You don't have to share anything personal, Joe, but the students, they made some assumptions. I thought you should know." Mr. Harris looked at him, just once. Then he reached into his worn backpack and pulled out a flat leather case, black, faded, creased. He opened it. Inside, A military ID, yellowed at the corners, and beneath it, 2 medals. One was a bronze star, the other was a purple heart. Delgado stared. His throat tightened. "Joe, I had no idea." The old janitor didn't smile, didn't explain. He simply said, "You weren't supposed to." Then he stood up and walked out. The Monday after the video incident, something changed. It wasn't loud. It didn't come with announcements or apologies, but the whispers stopped. Students who used to snicker now averted their eyes. The janitor jokes vanished. Even the bold ones, the ones who laughed loudest, suddenly had nothing to say when Mr. Harris passed by. He didn't react, didn't smirk, didn't scold. He just kept doing what he'd always done, emptying trash cans, checking boiler pressure, wiping down desks. But now he moved through halls that had grown quieter. Not out of respect, not yet. Out of something simpler. Uncertainty. That afternoon, Principal Holloway requested a private meeting. Not mandatory, she'd said, just a conversation. Mr. Harris arrived precisely at 3:35 p.m. She offered him tea. He declined. "You've been working here 9 years, she began, flipping through a personnel file that felt suddenly inadequate. Never late, never asked for vacation, not even a sick day. He nodded once. "Your file says you served, but there's nothing beyond that." Another nod. "Is it all right if I ask?" He looked up. For a moment, something behind his eyes moved, like a shadow stepping briefly into light. Then he exhaled, slow and steady. 31 years active, 22 in special operations. She blinked. "You retired as Lieutenant Colonel, and then janitor?" Her voice wasn't mocking, just confused. "I needed silence," he said, "and movement." That evening, long after everyone had gone home, Mr. Harris sat in the small break room off the gymnasium. The room smelled like bleach and cracked leather. He unfolded an old napkin, unwrapped a peanut butter sandwich, took small, deliberate bites, and stared at the wall. On it hung a poster. "We salute our veterans. Thank you for your service." Dozens of names were printed below, none of them his. He didn't resent it. He had chosen the background. But some nights, it whispered louder than others. 12 years ago, he'd buried his wife. Cancer, fast, brutal, unfair. They had planned to retire near the Shenandoah, open a small bookshop with a coffee stand. She'd wanted a golden retriever. He had learned to like Earl Grey for her. After she passed, the silence of their home became unbearable. The commendations, the plaques, the medals, they felt heavier than ever before. So he boxed them, donated most of his old uniforms, kept one jacket and one photo. Then, he moved 3 towns over, saw a posting for janitorial work at Westfield High, took the night shift, no interviews, no expectations, just clean floors and silence. He never stopped being a soldier, he just stopped being seen as one. But the instinct stayed. He noticed which lockers were opened roughly, which kids wore the same hoodie 3 days in a row, which teacher cried quietly in her car before morning bell. He didn't interfere. He just watched and listened and swept and sometimes helped in ways no one noticed. There was one girl, Eva Marsh, sophomore, seat by the window in room 206. She always stayed late, worked through lunch, kept a library card clipped to her bag like it was a badge. He noticed how she winced when people touched her shoulder, how she kept her sleeves pulled down, how she smiled too quickly when asked how she was doing. So one morning, long before the halls filled, he left a folded post-it note on her desk. No name, just words. "You are not what happened to you. You are what you do next." She never said a word, but she stopped skipping lunch after that. He also noticed the boy in the varsity jacket, Denny, one of the pranksters. He saw the fear behind the boy's eyes after the incident, not fear of punishment, fear of confrontation. So, during trash pickup in the gym, Mr. Harris passed him a rolled-up towel he'd found in the locker room, still damp, still folded. Inside, a note in block print. Sometimes the strongest men are the first to admit they were wrong. Denny never replied, but 3 days later, he came early to practice and cleaned the benches before his coach arrived. No one said anything, but the janitor saw. That Friday, while fixing a light fixture in the library, a student approached him. It was Tyler, the one who filmed the video. "Mr. Harris?" "Yes." The boy hesitated, fidgeted. "I didn't know. About you? I mean, who you were." The janitor looked at him. "Does it matter?" "It should've. I'm sorry." Mr. Harris nodded. "We all start blind. What matters is whether you choose to see after." The boy blinked, then whispered, "Thank you," and left. That night, Mr. Harris pulled out the photo from his wallet, faded, edges frayed. His squad, 12 men. Camouflage, dust, sunburn, pride. 7 of them were gone now. Each time he saw their faces, he remembered why he never asked for thanks. Because you don't need a spotlight when you're carrying 12 names in your chest. You just need room to breathe. The storm didn't come from Mr. Harris. It came from a senior named Leah Kim, the quietest in the journalism club. She had stayed after school that Thursday to pick up a camera left in the science wing. The janitor was there, replacing a flickering ballast above the stairwell. She nodded as she passed. He nodded back. Something about his posture struck her. How he moved with precision, the steadiness, the calm. She had seen the video, the prank. She hadn't liked it, but she hadn't said anything either. That day, she did. "Mr. Harris, I know this is random, but would you ever let me interview you?" He looked at her, then back at the light fixture. "Why?" "Because people think they know who you are, and they don't." He didn't respond, just twisted the last screw into place. The light buzzed to life. "I'm not looking for attention," he said at last. "I'm not offering it," she replied. "Just space to be seen, if you want it." A long pause, then, "Come back tomorrow, after final bell." She did. They sat in the janitor's supply room, cramped, warm, dust floating like tiny ghosts through the slanted sunlight. He didn't give a performance. He didn't open with rank or glory. He just answered. "Why janitor?" she asked. "Because peace doesn't come with titles," he said. "Do you miss being in command?" "Only when no one's listening." "Were you decorated?" He shrugged. "You don't carry medals. You carry memories." Then he stood, pulled a small file from his locker, a manila folder, rubber banded tight, paper yellowed with time. "You want the story?" he said. "Read this first." Inside, deployment records, training rosters, an Army Commendation Medal citation, 2 letters from squad mates' families, a photograph of him, age 35, receiving a Bronze Star from a 4-star general in the middle of the desert, and at the very bottom, a handwritten list of names, 11 names, with dates of death beside them. Leah held her breath. "Are these?" "My brothers." The story broke 3 days later, not as an exposé, but as a feature in the school's online paper. "The Man Who Cleans Our Halls Once Led Men into Fire" by Leah Kim. The article wasn't sensational. It was quiet. Facts, dates, quotes. He never asked to be known. That's exactly why he should be. Within hours, the article spread. Teachers read it aloud during homeroom. Parents emailed the principal. Even the local paper called to request reprint rights. No one could believe it. The man they had overlooked for nearly a decade had once commanded units in Mosul and Fallujah, had trained NATO field teams, had pulled 3 men from a burning convoy under direct mortar fire. He had awards, rank, recognition, and yet he'd chosen mop buckets over memoirs. By Wednesday, someone placed a sticky note on the supply closet door. "Thank you for your quiet strength." By Thursday, the sticky notes covered the entire door. Some were from students. "I'll never throw trash on the floor again." "You're the kind of man I want to be." "Sorry we didn't see you sooner." Some were from teachers. "You've taught me more about integrity than any seminar ever did." "You remind me of my father. He never talked either." One simply read, "Respect." Mr. Harris didn't speak about the article. He didn't post it. He didn't mention it in the break room. But Leah noticed something different about him that week. He looked people in the eye a second longer. He paused in hallways when students greeted him. He even nodded back, once, sharply, when the football captain offered a handshake near the vending machines. Not pride, not validation, just being seen. That Friday, the school announced a veterans assembly for the following week. The planning committee offered him a seat on stage. He declined. Instead, he asked to be the one who set up the chairs. "It's what I do," he said. The principal tried to insist. "Joe, after all this, surely—" He held up a hand. "They've said enough. Let's not turn it into a monument." But when the assembly began and over 400 students filled the gymnasium, there was an empty chair in the front row. Someone had placed a folded flag on it and a printed sign taped to the seat, "For the one who never stopped serving." Mr. Harris stood in the back, hands behind his back, head high. He didn't need a spotlight. He had the whole room's silence. The hallway felt different now. It wasn't the lighting, or the paint, or the new floor wax that made the linoleum shine. It was the silence. Not the kind of silence that meant boredom, but the kind that meant reverence, awareness. Students who used to toss wrappers and walk past the janitor like he was part of the architecture now nodded. Some stopped. A few even helped carry trash bins unprompted. But the most unexpected change came from the ones who had laughed the loudest. Mason Blake hadn't meant to be cruel, or at least that's what he told himself. The senior prank, mopping detergent on the stairs and watching Mr. Harris nearly slip, had felt like tradition, like harmless teenage antics, a joke. But after the article, after the assembly, it didn't feel harmless anymore. It felt hollow. He hadn't spoken to Mr. Harris since that day. Couldn't. The guilt lodged somewhere deep behind his collarbone. But that didn't stop the memory from replaying. How Mr. Harris had steadied himself, how he hadn't yelled, how he had just turned back and kept working. That kind of restraint haunted Mason, because he knew he wouldn't have done the same. The change didn't come overnight. It came slowly, like a thaw. One afternoon, Mason walked past the supply closet. The sticky notes were still there, faded but firm. One note in particular caught his eye. "It's not too late to be better." He read it again, and then, without knowing why, he waited until the end of the day and found Mr. Harris pushing a mop cart near the science wing. Mason approached like someone nearing a confession booth. "Hey, Mr. Harris, got a second?" The janitor paused, looked up. "Sure. I just wanted to say sorry about that prank a while back. I know it was messed up and I should have said something sooner." A long silence. Then Mr. Harris nodded slowly. "You just did." "I didn't know," Mason added. Mr. Harris didn't flinch. "You weren't supposed to. That's the thing about uniforms. You don't wear them forever. But character? That's daily issue." Mason swallowed hard. "Would it be weird if I asked how you ended up here?" Mr. Harris smiled faintly. "Not weird, just late." He leaned against the mop handle, thoughtful. "After retirement, I tried teaching, but it didn't feel right. Then I worked logistics for a while, then security, and then this." "This?" Mason echoed. "This is honest work. Quiet. And sometimes, when no one's watching, it feels like peace. Mason nodded, not fully understanding, but knowing somehow that the words mattered. "I'm trying to figure out what kind of man I want to be," he said, almost whispering. "Start by being one who notices others," Mr. Harris replied. "That's where everything changes." Word spread that Mr. Harris had spoken to Mason. The next day, a group of freshmen asked if they could start a service day project, helping clean the school once a month. They named it the Quiet Crew. He didn't want it named after him, but they insisted. "It's not for your name," one girl said. "It's for what your silence taught us." Mr. Harris gave in, with one condition. "You don't just clean the halls, you clean the way you see people." It wasn't a revolution. There were still days kids forgot, still trash left behind, still jokes whispered under breath. But it was different now, because the hallway had an echo of a man who once walked them in silence and was finally seen, and that echo stayed. The invitation came folded in 3, typed on cream cardstock. Simple. "You are cordially invited to the 40th anniversary of the 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines, Kandahar deployment veterans." It had been 39 years and 8 months since Mr. Harris had last seen some of those names, and yet, seeing them in ink, Lieutenant Commander D. Wells, Sergeant Mason Buck Lane, Ciple L. Dominguez, felt like turning on an old radio and hearing the exact voice you'd forgotten how much you missed. He hesitated. For days, he left the letter on his nightstand, not because he didn't want to go, but because the janitor in him didn't know if the soldier in him still fit anywhere. The reunion was held in a quiet lodge near the Blue Ridge Mountains. Nothing fancy, just heavy wood beams, worn flags, polished boots, and the kind of silence that only war survivors know how to sit in comfortably. When Mr. Harris walked in, no one recognized him at first. He'd gained weight, his beard was gray now, and he wore the same navy blue janitor's jacket he always did. But then, a voice from across the room broke the quiet. "No way! Is that Harris?" A flurry of chairs, a rush of boots. "John freaking Harris? Are you kidding me?" Sergeant Lane was the first to get to him, hugged him so hard he nearly knocked the mop badge off his chest. "Man, I thought you were in Florida or something." "Nah," Mr. Harris said with that half smile. "Just cleaning up a high school out in Georgia." Everyone laughed, then fell silent. Lieutenant Commander Wells stepped forward. "You still cleaning up after people, huh?" "Some habits stick," Harris replied. They handed him a beer, pulled up a chair, and just like that, time folded. They talked and remembered. About the kid named Tucker who used to sing in his sleep. About Dominguez's bad salsa moves. About the day they lost Martinez. And everything changed. Later that evening, the men gathered around a small flag display. One by one, they laid down photos, notes, dog tags. Mr. Harris reached into his coat and placed a folded slip of paper on the table. It was a copy of the high school article. Lieutenant Wells raised an eyebrow. "You made the papers?" "Not for what you'd think," Harris said quietly. "The kids, they laughed at me until they knew who I was." Lane frowned. "That's their loss." "No," Harris said, shaking his head. He looked at them all, eyes clearer than they had been in years. "That's our job now, to remind them, not of medals or ranks, but of what it looks like to walk through life, quietly, with dignity, even when no one claps." The room fell still, because they all knew. Sometimes the hardest mission wasn't surviving war, it was surviving peace. Back at the school the next Monday, the bell rang like any other day. Mr. Harris rolled his mop cart down the hallway. He passed by room 207, Mason's classroom now. The boy had graduated, gone to college, come back, and was now teaching history. Outside the door, a sign hung from a small wooden plaque. "Respect is the floor we stand on." Mason nodded through the window when he saw him. And Harris just kept walking. That afternoon, as the last bell rang and students spilled out into the sun, a boy stopped beside him, sixth grader, gangly, curious. "Hey, Mr. Harris, were you really in the military?" The janitor paused, looked down. "Yeah, a long time ago." The boy squinted. "Cool. My dad says you're a hero." Harris smiled softly. "Tell your dad I'm just a man who kept sweeping." The boy thought for a moment. "But you swept more than floors, right?" Harris didn't answer. He didn't need to. He just nodded once, slow and sure, and kept sweeping.